The year was 2347 when everything changed for humanity, and the universe would never be the same. Again, Commander Ethan Cole stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel, Horizon's Edge, and watched the stars through the main viewport with a sense of wonder that had never left him despite 20 years in space services. Crew worked quietly at their stations while the ship drifted through the outer reaches of the Andromeda sector, where no human had ever traveled before. The scanner officer, a young woman named Hannah Price, suddenly looked up from her console with wide eyes and called out to the commander, "Sir, we have contact with multiple vessels approaching our position, and they are not human ships." Ethan felt his heart skip beat as he moved to her station and looked at the readings that showed 12 massive ships emerging from what appeared to be some kind of dimensional gateway. These were the first aliens humanity had ever encountered, and they were absolutely enormous. Compared to the Horizon's Edge, the lead vessel was at least 10 kilometers long and shaped like a crystal spire that glowed with internal light. A communication signal came through, and the translation system struggled for several minutes before producing something understandable. "Unknown vessel? You have entered Consortium space, and you will identify yourselves immediately or face termination." Ethan took a deep breath and responded with the calm voice of a man who had faced death many times before. "This is Commander Ethan Cole of the United Earth vessel Horizon's Edge, and we come in peace, seeking to establish contact with other intelligent species." There was a long pause before the alien voice returned with what sounded like amusement in its tone. "You are the humans from the small blue planet in the outer spiral arm, and we have been watching your species for 3 of your centuries, and we find you quite unremarkable." The Volanthi ambassador named Corvith materialized on the bridge through some form of teleportation technology that made humanity's best science look like children playing with toys. He was tall and made of living crystal that shifted colors as he moved, and his eyes were deep pools of swirling light. Corvith looked around the bridge with obvious contempt and examined the human technology with the expression of someone looking at primitive cave drawings. "Your ships are crude, your weapons are laughable, and your lifespans are pathetically short," he said, without any attempt at diplomacy. "How did your species even manage to leave your homeworld with such limited capabilities?" Ethan smiled at the insult, a gesture that confused the alien ambassador completely. "We get that a lot," Ethan replied, "but we tend to surprise people who underestimate us." The Galactic Consortium was a coalition of 12 elder species who had ruled the stars for over 50,000 years and maintained order across 7 galaxies. They had seen countless young species rise and fall, and they had developed a system for managing new civilizations that joined their territory. Humanity was granted provisional membership and given access to the most basic technologies while being confined to the outer territories where failed civilizations were sent to quietly fade away. The Consortium expected humanity to be grateful for the scraps they were given and to remain silent and obedient like all the other young species before them. But the Consortium had made a terrible mistake in their assessment. They did not understand what humanity truly was and what they were capable of becoming. Lieutenant Hannah Price spent every waking hour studying the Consortium technology samples they had been given, and her brilliant mind began to unlock secrets the aliens had never shared. She worked in her small laboratory aboard the Horizon's Edge with a determination that bordered on obsession. Within 6 months, she had reverse engineered the basic propulsion systems and sent her findings back to Earth, where teams of scientists built upon her work. Admiral Catherine Boyd, who commanded Earth's small defense fleet, watched the progress with growing excitement and began to plan for a future the Consortium could not imagine. She was 53 years old, with silver hair and eyes that had seen humanity struggle and survive against impossible odds throughout history. "They think we are nothing," she told her officers during a secret briefing on Earth, And that is exactly what we want them to think for now. The shipyards of Earth and the colony worlds began producing new vessels in secret, hidden from consortium sensors by technology that Hannah Price had developed within 2 years. These ships outperformed their alien counterparts in every measurable way, and the humans who crewed them trained in tactics. The elder species had never considered young officers like Derek Shaw, and Samuel Grant rose through the ranks with innovative ideas that challenged every assumption about space warfare. Derek was a tactical genius who saw patterns in chaos, while Samuel was a natural leader who inspired absolute loyalty in his crew's president. Marcus Webb quietly built alliances with other marginalized species in the outer territories, races that have been dismissed and forgotten by the consortium. Just like humanity, the Tharans were a peaceful people who had been conquered and enslaved for millennia, and they saw in humanity a spark of hope they had long abandoned. Dr. Lisa Morton, a physicist from the colony world of Aurora, made breakthroughs in energy manipulation that would have terrified the consortium if they had known about them. She was young and brilliant, and driven by a desire to see humanity take its rightful place. Among the stars, the consortium continued to ignore the small blue planet and its unremarkable inhabitants while focusing on their ancient political games and territorial disputes. Ambassador Corvith filed his report on humanity and recommended minimal observation, describing them as no threat to the established order. He could not have been more wrong, and his mistake would cost the consortium everything they had built over 50,000 years on Earth. The children learned about the stars and dreamed of the day when humanity would no longer bow to alien masters who looked down on them with contempt. Ethan Cole returned home as a hero and spent his remaining years training the next generation of explorers and warriors. He told them stories of the consortium and their arrogance, and he warned them that the universe was not a kind place for the weak. "We have been underestimated our entire existence," he said in his final address to the Academy, "and that has always been our greatest advantage." Hannah Price continued her research and made discovery after discovery that pushed human technology forward at a pace the galaxy had never witnessed. She became the mother of a new age of innovation, and her students would go on to change everything. The flames of human ambition had been lit, and they were beginning to spread. No one in the consortium noticed the smoke on the horizon, and by the time they did, it would be far too late to stop what was coming. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and they had no intention of remaining in the shadows where the elder species had placed them. The universe was about to learn what happened when you gave fire to a species that had never known how to stay down. 20 years had passed since first contact, and humanity had changed in ways the galaxy could not comprehend. They had spread across 40 star systems and built colonies on worlds that the consortium had declared uninhabitable. Their population had tripled, and their technology had advanced by centuries in what seemed like the blink of an eye to the elder species. Admiral Catherine Boyd now commanded the Third Fleet from her flagship, the Resolute, a vessel that would have seemed like magic to the humans of just 2 decades earlier. She stood in her ready room and studied the tactical displays that showed human territory expanding like a growing flame across the outer rim. Commander Derek Shaw entered with a datapad containing the latest intelligence reports, and his face was grim. "The consortium has begun restricting our expansion routes," he said, "and they are claiming that we are growing too quickly and disrupting the natural order." Catherine laughed without humor and shook her head at the predictability of it all. "They are afraid of us," she replied, "and fear makes people do incredibly stupid things." The stupidest thing the consortium did was form an alliance with the Kethrani Dominion, a brutal empire that had conquered 6 galaxies through genocide and absolute terror. The Kethrani were insectoid beings with no concept of mercy or compassion, and they viewed all other species as either useful slaves or obstacles to be eliminated. They had heard of humanity and seen the reports of their rapid advancement, and they demanded that the consortium allow them to deal with the human problem before it grew. Beyond Control Ambassador Corvith argued against this alliance, but his voice was drowned out by elder species who wanted the human threat neutralized quickly and quietly. The Kethrani were given permission to act, and they wasted no time in preparing their assault. New Haven was a peaceful colony world on the edge of human space where 2 million civilians had built a beautiful civilization. Farmers worked the fertile lands while scientists studied the unique ecosystem and children played in parks. Under a warm yellow sun, they had no military installations and posed no threat to anyone, and that was precisely why the Kethrani chose them as their target. The attack came without any warning on a clear morning, when the sky suddenly filled with dark shapes descending through the atmosphere. Kethran warships numbered in the hundreds, and they immediately began burning everything they could see. Buildings exploded into flames and people ran, screaming through streets that had known only peace. The Colonial Defense Force consisted of 12 small patrol vessels that were designed for search and rescue rather than combat. Captain Nathan Hayes led these ships against the invaders, knowing that he had no chance of victory, but refusing to let his people die. Without a fight, his lost transmission was received on Earth. 6 hours after the attack began, "Tell them we did not run," he said, as explosions rocked his dying ship. "Tell them we stood and we fought, and we did not surrender." The Kethrani took their time destroying New Haven, and they broadcast their atrocities across all frequencies so that humanity would see what happened to species who challenged the natural order when the last city fell and the last human on the planet drew their final breath. The Kethrani commander sent a message to Earth. "This is your future," he said with clicking mandibles that conveyed alien amusement. "Submit now, and we may allow some of you to live as slaves." The message reached Earth and was played in every city and every colony across human space. 2 million innocent people had been murdered for no reason other than to send a message, and the universe waited to see how humanity would respond. President Marcus Webb addressed the United Earth Assembly with tears running down his weathered face. He had served his people for 30 years and had always believed that peace was possible with any species willing to talk. But he had just watched children burn and heard their screams echo across the void of space. "They think we are weak because we are young," he said in a voice that started soft but grew stronger with each word. "They think we will bow because we have not yet learned how to fight against those who would destroy us." He paused and looked at the assembly members who represented every nation and colony in human space. "But they have forgotten something very important about our species and our history." His voice became hard as iron and cold as the void between stars. "We were born fighting for survival in a universe that has tried to kill us since the beginning of our existence. We have never known true peace because there has always been something trying to destroy us, and we have never, not once in our entire history, learned how to forgive those who harm our children." The assembly voted unanimously for war, and the declaration was sent across all human space. Within the hour, Admiral Boyd received the orders aboard the Resolute and called her senior officers to the bridge. Derek Shaw stood at her right hand while tactical screens lit up with target coordinates and fleet positions. "The Kethrani have 600 capital ships in this sector," Derek reported, "and the consortium has pledged to support them if we retaliate." Catherine looked at her fleet of 90 vessels and smiled, a predator's smile that made her officers feel a mix of pride and pity for their enemies. "Then we had better make sure our retaliation is something the entire galaxy will remember forever." She opened a channel to all ships in the fleet, and her voice rang out clear and strong. "This is Admiral Boyd to all vessels under my command. 20 years ago, they called us unremarkable and gave us the scraps from their table. Today, they murdered 2 million of our people and expected us to kneel. We are going to show them exactly how remarkable humanity can be when we have a reason to fight. All ships prepare for combat operations, and may whatever gods you believe in have mercy on our enemies. Because we certainly will not. The third fleet jumped to faster than light speed, and the flames of human vengeance began to spread across the stars. Kethrani had wanted to send a message to humanity, and they had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. They just had not understood what the message would truly mean. The Kethrani Dominion had conquered 6 galaxies over the course of their million-year history, and no species had ever truly challenged them. Every civilization they encountered eventually broke under the weight of their superior numbers and their absolute willingness to commit any atrocity necessary for victory. They expected humanity to crumble like all the others, and their war planners had predicted total human surrender within 6 standard months. They had made calculations based on population, industrial capacity, and military strength, and the numbers clearly showed that humanity could not possibly win this conflict. What their calculations could not account for was the nature of the human spirit. Captain Samuel Grant led the first counterattack against Kethrani supply lines in the Orion sector 3 weeks after the fall of New Haven. His squadron consisted of 12 ships crewed by men and women who had volunteered knowing they might not return home. They faced 47 Kethrani vessels that outgunned them by a factor of 4 to 1, and any rational analysis said they should retreat and wait for reinforcements. Samuel was not interested in rational analysis. They fight in straight lines, he told his crew as they approached the enemy formation, because they have been doing it for 1,000,000 years, and it has always worked. He smiled, and his crew smiled with him because they understood what he was about to say. Well, it does not work against us. The human ships scattered in what appeared to be chaotic patterns, but was actually a carefully choreographed dance designed to confuse enemy targeting systems. They struck from unexpected angles and retreated before the Kethrani could bring their superior firepower to bear. They used asteroids as cover and jumped in and out of faster-than-light travel in ways the aliens had never seen any species attempt. When the battle ended 12 hours later, Samuel had lost 2 ships but had destroyed all 47 enemy vessels. The Kethrani High Command received the report and dismissed it as an anomaly that would not be repeated. They were very wrong about that. Humanity did not fight according to the rules that the galaxy had established over millennia of warfare. They used guerrilla tactics that the elder species considered beneath civilized beings. They launched ambush from hidden bases in asteroid fields and nebulae where no one expected them to survive. They hacked enemy communications and fed false information that led Kethrani fleets into traps. They captured enemy ships and turned them against their former masters in psychological warfare operations that terrified the insectoid commanders. Dr. Lisa Morton worked in a secret laboratory on a moon that did not officially exist, and she created weapons that the Consortium had banned as too dangerous for any species to possess. Her greatest creation was a device that could collapse a star into a directed energy beam capable of destroying anything in its path. When the Consortium learned of this weapon, they demanded that humanity surrender it. Immediately, Admiral Boyd sent them a simple response that consisted of 2 words that cannot be repeated in polite company. The war spread across 3 sectors, and the Kethrani found themselves losing ground for the first time in their history. Their conquered territories began to hear stories of the human warriors who fought like demons but showed mercy to those who had been enslaved. Therans rose up first on a dozen worlds where they had been kept in chains for 10,000 years. They were a gentle people who had forgotten how to fight, but they remembered how to hope. And humanity had given them that gift. Other species followed, and soon the Kethrani were fighting on 100 fronts against enemies they had never expected to face. Commander Derek Shaw led a strike force deep into Kethrani territory and destroyed their primary shipyard in an operation that should have been impossible. He lost half his ships, but the enemy lost the ability to replace their losses, and the tide of the war shifted permanently in that single battle. The Consortium watched in growing horror as their carefully maintained galactic order collapsed around them. They had expected the Kethrani to quickly crush the human rebellion and restore stability, but instead, they were watching an empire fall. Ambassador Corvith requested an audience with the human leadership and traveled to Earth for the first time since first contact. He found a world transformed beyond recognition, with cities that gleamed with technology his people had never shared, and shipyards that produced vessels superior to anything in Consortium. Space Admiral Boyd received him in a chamber that had once been used for peaceful diplomatic meetings, but now served as a war room. She was older now, with more silver in her hair and more steel in her eyes. "You must stop this madness," Corvith pleaded with genuine fear in his crystalline voice. "You are destabilizing the entire galaxy, and countless billions will die if this war continues." Catherine leaned forward in her chair and looked at the alien who had once called her species unremarkable. "You watched 2 million of our people die on New Haven, and you did nothing to prevent it. You called us unremarkable and tried to contain us like animals in a cage. You gave the Kethrani permission to murder our children and expected us to accept it quietly." She stood, and her presence seemed to fill the entire room with a force the ambassador could not understand. "We are done being contained, and we are done asking for permission to exist." Corvith tried to speak, but Catherine raised her hand and silenced him. "Go back to your Consortium and tell them what you have seen here today. Tell them that humanity is coming, and nothing in this galaxy will stop us. Tell them that the flames they tried to extinguish have become an inferno." The ambassador left Earth and reported to the Consortium Council that humanity could not be stopped through force. Some of the elder species refused to believe him and demanded more aggressive action against the human threat. Others began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake in how they had treated the young species from the small blue planet. The war entered its third year, and the Kethrani Dominion began to fracture as defeat followed defeat. Humanity pressed forward with relentless determination, and the galaxy learned a lesson it would never forget. The species they had dismissed as unremarkable had become the most dangerous force the universe had ever known. The war lasted 7 years, and when it finally ended, the Kethrani Dominion existed only in history books. Their homeworld had been captured by human forces in a final campaign that lasted 3 months and cost the lives of 10,000 brave soldiers. The Kethrani leadership was put on trial for crimes against sentient life in a court that included judges from every species they had ever wronged. Admiral Catherine Boyd attended the sentencing as a witness and watched as justice was delivered for the 2 million souls of New Haven. But humanity did not stop with victory over their enemies, because they had learned something important during the long years of conflict. They had learned that power without purpose was meaningless, and that true strength came from lifting others rather than crushing them. Commander Derek Shaw, now an admiral in his own right, led the Liberation Fleet to the Theron Nebula, where 300 billion beings had suffered under Kethrani occupation for millennia. His flagship, the Defiant, emerged from faster-than-light travel above a world that had known nothing but chains and despair for 10,000 years. The Theron people looked up at the human vessels with fear at first, because ships in their sky had only ever brought pain and death. Derek broadcast a message on all frequencies, and his voice carried across a world that had forgotten what hope sounded like. "People of Tharos, my name is Admiral Derek Shaw of the United Earth Alliance. The Kethrani Dominion has fallen, and you are free. We have not come to conquer you or to replace your old masters with new ones. We have come to help you rebuild and to stand beside you as equals in a new galaxy." An elderly Theron named Velis was among the first to meet the human liberators when they landed on the surface. He had lived his entire life as a slave and had watched his children and grandchildren born into bondage. With no hope of freedom, tears flowed down his weathered face as he approached Admiral Shaw and struggled to find words. "We heard stories," Velis finally said in a voice cracked with emotion. "Stories of a young species that fought like demons against impossible odds, but showed mercy to the fallen. We thought they were myths created to give us false hope in our darkest hours." Derek knelt before the old man and took his hands gently. "We are no myth, and you are no longer alone. From this day forward, the Theran people will have a voice in their own destiny, and any species that tries to put you in chains again will answer to humanity." The liberation of the Theran Nebula was just the beginning of a transformation that would reshape the entire galaxy. Humanity established the Galactic Alliance as a new coalition built on principles that the Consortium had never imagined possible. Every member species would have equal representation, regardless of how old or powerful they were. Every civilization would contribute what they could and receive what they needed. Every being would be protected by laws that recognized their fundamental dignity and right. Species that had been marginalized and forgotten for millennia found themselves with seats at the table for the first time in their history. The Volanti joined reluctantly at first, their pride wounded by having to accept humans as equals, but they soon discovered that cooperation brought benefits they had never achieved through domination. Dr. Lisa Morton became Secretary of Science for the Alliance and oversaw the distribution of human technology to member worlds. She remembered being a young researcher with impossible dreams, and now she was helping other species achieve their own impossible dreams. Within a decade, the outer territories had transformed from backwater colonies into thriving civilizations with economies and cultures that enriched the entire galaxy. Children who had been born into slavery grew up to become scientists, artists, and leaders who pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Consortium watched as their influence faded and their ancient power structures became irrelevant. Ambassador Corvith traveled to Earth once again, but this time he came not to threaten or demand, but to request. He stood before President Grace Holloway in the same chamber where humanity had declared war 7 years earlier. Grace was a calm woman with kind eyes, but there was steel beneath her gentle exterior. "We underestimated your species," Corvith admitted with genuine humility that would have been unthinkable from him 20 years ago. "We see now that you are not a threat to be contained, but a force to be respected and perhaps even admired. The Consortium wishes to join the Galactic Alliance and contribute to the future you are building." Grace considered his words carefully before responding. "We accept your respect, and we welcome your membership in the Alliance. But we will never forget what you allowed to happen. When you had the power to prevent it, trust must be earned through actions, not words, and that will take time." Corvith bowed before a human leader, something no elder species had done in 50,000 years. "We understand, and we will prove ourselves worthy of that trust. Humanity has taught the galaxy a lesson we should have learned long ago, that the measure of a civilization is not how it treats the powerful, but how it protects the weak." The Alliance grew stronger with each passing year, and the flames of human influence spread to every corner of the known universe. Not flames of destruction, as the Kathrani had brought, but flames of hope and progress and possibility. Former enemies became friends, and former victims became partners in building something greater than any single species could achieve alone. Admiral Catherine Boyd retired from active service and spent her remaining years teaching at the Academy, where young officers from 100 worlds learned the principles that had made humanity great. She told them about the dark days of the war and the sacrifices that had been made for victory, but more importantly, she told them about what came after. Anyone can win a war, she said in her final lecture before a hall filled with eager faces of every shape and color. The true test of a species is what they do with the peace that follows. Will you use your power to dominate and control, like those who came before? You. Or will you use it to light a flame that will guide others through the darkness? The students carried her words with them as they went out into a galaxy that their grandparents could never have imagined, and the flame continued to spread. 50 years had passed since the end of the HFY War, and the galaxy had become a place that would have seemed like paradise to those who had lived through the dark times. The Galactic Alliance now included over 2,000 member species and stretched across 12 galaxies that worked together in harmony. Humanity had become the heart of this new civilization, not through force or domination, but through the example they set for others to follow. Admiral Catherine Boyd was 93 years old when she gave her final public address at the unveiling of the New Haven Memorial. The monument stood on a world that had been rebuilt from ashes into a garden of remembrance, where the names of every person who had died in the attack were carved into walls of white stone. Beings from across the galaxy had traveled to witness this moment, and the crowd stretched to the horizon under a sky filled with ships from 100 worlds. Catherine stood at the podium with the help of a simple cane, and her voice was carried by technology that would have seemed like magic to her younger self. 50 years ago, we faced a choice that would determine the future of our species and perhaps the entire universe. We could have become what we fought against when we gained the power to do so. We could have used our strength to dominate and destroy, just as the HFY had done before us. Many expected us to follow that path because history had shown that power corrupts those who wield it. She paused and looked out at the crowd of humans and Therans and Volanti and dozens of other species who had come to pay their respects. But that is not who we are, and it is not what we chose to become. We are explorers who seek to understand the mysteries of existence. We are builders who create rather than destroy. We are carriers of a flame that lights the way through darkness for all who choose to follow. The crowd stood in silence as the old Admiral spoke words that would be remembered for generations to come. The 2 million souls we honor today did not die in vain. Their sacrifice ignited something in humanity that can never be extinguished. And that flame has spread across the stars to warm worlds that had known only cold and fear. This is their legacy, and it is our sacred duty to keep that flame burning for as long as we exist. In the years that followed, humanity continued to push the boundaries of what was possible. They explored regions of space that had never been charted and made contact with species that had thought themselves alone in the universe. Some of these new civilizations welcomed the HFY Alliance with open arms, while others viewed the humans with suspicion. Few even tried to challenge the new galactic order, but they quickly learned the same lesson that the HFY had learned so many years before. Humanity did not seek war, but they did not run from it when the innocent needed protection. On the bridge of the newest exploration vessel, the Eternal Dawn, Captain Nathan Price watched the star stream past as his ship traveled faster than any vessel in history. He was the grandson of Hannah Price, the brilliant engineer who had first unlocked the secrets of consortium technology. So many decades ago, Nathan had inherited her curiosity and her determination to push beyond every limit that others accepted. His crew was a mix of humans and aliens who had trained together at the Alliance Academy and shared a bond that transcended the boundaries of species. Lieutenant Maria Santos, his communications officer, looked up from her console with excitement in her eyes. "Captain, we are receiving a signal from beyond the galactic rim. It appears to be a distress call in a language our systems cannot translate. This could be a species that has never had contact with the Alliance or any known civilization." Nathan felt the same thrill that his grandmother must have felt when she first encountered alien technology. The unknown was calling to him, and he could not resist its pull. "Can you determine the source location?" he asked Maria. Worked her console for several moments before nodding. "The signal is coming from a star system approximately 300 light years beyond our current position. At maximum speed we could reach Them in about 6 hours. Nathan looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew and saw the same excitement reflected in their eyes. They had all joined the service to explore the unknown, and this was exactly the kind of mission they had dreamed about. Set a course and engage at maximum speed. Let us go make some new friends. The Eternal Dawn adjusted its heading and jumped to faster-than-light travel, leaving behind a trail of light that faded into the darkness as the ship raced toward the unknown. Nathan thought about the journey his species had taken to reach this moment. They had crawled out of caves on a small blue planet and struggled to survive against predators and disease and their own worst instincts. They had built civilizations that rose and fell and rose again, each time learning a little more about themselves and their place in the universe. They had reached for the stars and been told they were unremarkable by beings who had seen countless species fail. But humanity had not failed. They had been pushed down, and they had gotten back up. They had been underestimated, and they had exceeded every expectation. They had been given fire, and they had used it to light the way for others. The distress signal grew stronger as the Eternal Dawn approached its destination, and Nathan ordered his crew to prepare for first contact. Did not know what they would find when they arrived, but he knew that whatever challenges awaited them, humanity would face them the same way they had faced every challenge throughout their history, with courage and creativity and an unbreakable determination to make tomorrow better than today. The galaxy had thought humanity was unremarkable when they first arrived on the cosmic stage. They had been spectacularly wrong about that. Wherever humans went, they brought with them the flames of hope and progress and possibility. Those flames had spread across the galaxy and changed everything they touched. And now, as the Eternal Dawn raced toward the unknown, those flames were about to spread even further. Humanity had arrived in the universe, and they were just getting started. The adventure would never end as long as there were stars to explore and beings to help and mysteries to solve. This was the legacy of the small blue planet and its remarkable people. This was the story of how flames spread across the galaxy, and it was only the beginning.